Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'm discussing my thoughts on Series 10, Episode 3 of Doctor Who, Thin Ice. This was definitely an interesting episode, to say the least. But before I actually get into my overall reaction and thoughts on the episode as a whole, I thought I would begin the video with my references to past stories segment, where if you go back to my episode 1 discussion video for Series 10 on the pilot, I had actually taken to jotting down on a sheet of paper all the things I was reminded of while watching that particular episode. Very similarly so have I dedicated a whole bunch of things, a whole list of paper that I've broken up into brackets of things that I was heavily reminded of watching this particular episode. And we're just going to start off there for the time being. Under the first category I've loosely described as saving misunderstood aliens and or creatures. That's a large poignant aspect to this episode. We have this large fish, this marine life, that is being held captive and being exploited for, a specific purpose to benefit the society elites of the surrounding era and everything like that. And it very much reminded me of Series 5's The Beast Below, with the star whale, the 11th Doctor, and Amy on one of her first ventures, in the TARDIS to the future and everything like that. And I mean, it was cut very much from the same cloth. You had the star whale that was being held captive and being exploited in a similar fashion for the high society and everything like that. The survival, arguably, of all humanity of that era. And you kind of have a similar thing going on in this particular episode with this marine life, which is arguably of alien origin or not. I mean, the Doctor kind of has some minced words between he and Bill where she's asking, isn't it? And he's like, well, how would you know? That kind of thing. There's every possibility this giant fish could have existed, or it's a species that has, for hundreds of millions of years, underwater, deep down within the depths, and we've never seen before. But I just kind of assumed, well, it's probably alien in origin, who knows. For the Doctor to so quickly notice it and get involved, even if lives were being taken, it screams out alien origin to me, much as it did seemingly to Bill. Which also loosely reminded me, because we're dealing again with fish in the Doctor Who universe, of A Christmas Carol with all the floating fish and the shark on the air and everything. As well as Series 7's Hyde with the 11th Doctor and Clara, which delved into, very, very cursorily so toward the end of that episode, we were dealing with an interdimensional creature, sort of a husband and wife thing, I don't know which was which, that the Doctor has to save from the pocket universe closing in on itself and everything. And again, misunderstood creatures. They were thought to be monsters, part of the whole ghostly affair in the haunted mansion and everything. As we found out, it was the time traveler woman from the future as well. And as well as Time Heist from Series 8 with the 12th Doctor and Clara, which dealt very similarly so to Hyde with the Teller and his, air quotes, wife, whereas those creatures took much more of the focus in Time Heist than the two interdimensional creatures did in the aforementioned Hyde. But again, saving misunderstood or exploited aliens, and/or, in this case, exploited aliens, and as well as Kill the Moon from Series 8 with the 12th Doctor, Clara, and her student Courtney, which I think was even that much closer, sort of resonating in this episode, because we had the Doctor's ultimatum once again, although it wasn't nearly as harsh and a subject of cruel reality, a cruel awakening for Clara, or rather for Bill, as it was for Clara back in that episode, because of course the Doctor, when dealing with trying to save humanity versus saving this sort of alien moon baby thing they didn't really know or understand, and the Doctor was having no part of making that choice. It wasn't something he was going to hold on his shoulders. Better to leave it to the best representatives of humanity, in this case Clara, Courtney, and the scientist woman who was on Mars or whatever it was. And it really struck me, because of course there is some dialogue very much mirroring that between Bill and the Doctor, although it's not nearly as harsh and confrontational. The Doctor is once again leaving the decision-making up to the representative human, Bill, about whether or not they should just destroy the creature, this fish under the ice that is covering over the Thames, or they should try to preserve its life, try to save it. And he very much says, I'm not human. It's not my choice to make. It's up to you, boss, that kind of thing. And that's one of the sort of gripes I will loosely spill over into some of my overall reaction to this episode. One of my overall gripes is that the uniqueness of Bill, her voice, her as a character, was somewhat dialed back in this episode as we had seen in the first 2 episodes of the series thus far. I felt that more of her reactions in this episode could have more closely conformed to the average companion, so to speak. I use air quotes using that terminology because, it could have been an early Clara story, it could have been an early Amy story, that kind of thing, Rose or otherwise. There wasn't so much an emphasis in this episode on Bill's uniqueness. The thing that really made her stood out to me, the rapport and the playing back and forth between she and the Doctor, there were definitely elements of that still hold over in this episode. But a large majority of it, if you had told me that the writer of this episode, Sarah Dollard, who, I forget what episode she had previously actually written, I think it was the one where Clara dies a couple series ago. But, if you had told me she had written this script for another companion entirely and just reworked it, I would not be the least bit surprised, because I didn't hear so much of that uniqueness of character and that uniqueness of point of view that Bill had and embodied in the first 2 episodes of Series 10 so far. And so, most of her reactions, very understandably so, reacting to the little street urchin who was sucked under the ice. She had witnessed this murder, this child being killed. Not technically witnessing, like she didn't see him shot in front of her or anything. Being sucked down, knowing that he was going to his penultimate demise. Of course, that is very emotional and racking and shocking, and she had a very natural reaction to it. But again, it felt like what we've seen before. I almost would have garnered a suspicion that Bill would have had a somewhat different reaction. Not to say that she would be callous or, inhumanitarian, if that's even a word, showing a lack of compassion. Of course, I would have thought she would have shown that, but I didn't expect her to be so emotional and so immediately sort of scathing toward the Doctor, because, there seems to be a lot of this that she's 3 steps ahead of the game with, that she can sort of predict. And this really just spells out, once again, here is a companion who really has sort of befriended the Doctor, come to trust him, but then she's suddenly realizing the cold, hard reality. For the limited amount of time they've spent together, she doesn't know as much about him as she maybe suspected. And, a lot of the back and forth about, have you seen people die? How many has that been? How long did it take for you to lose count? Have you taken lives? And her getting confrontational along those lines felt more Bill-esque. But the way it was performed, the way it was filmed, it felt like been there, done that in a lot of ways. And not in the sort of ingratiating way that, when she first encounters the TARDIS and, it's bigger on the inside and everything, that is endearing. That is something we want to see again and again and again. There are times when it just exacerbates me to no end that, here are companions, the way they are showing their remorse and their confusion and their uncertainty in the face of death. I would almost have expected Bill to be a little more quiet and reserved, not as emotional, not as prone to an outburst, but it is what it is. This is who she is, like it or not. And I wish I hadn't felt so much like I'd seen it before. Been there, done that, as I say. Another category I've listed is stories taking place underwater, or at least being underwater, playing into it in the modern series. 2 came to mind to me, and that was Cold War from Series 7 with the 11th Doctor and Clara. They were on board the submarine with the Ice Warrior run amok, and I guess in a manner of speaking, you could argue that, it was saving a misunderstood alien as well. From, I haven't even written down what series this was. I believe it was Series 9. Under the Lake Before the Flood with the 12th Doctor and Clara. Of course, dealing with an underwater base and everything like that, and some of the aspects of it were also dealt with above water and timey-wimey, so, if you will. Is that even a word? And then I have one category that I've listed, race and time, and that is because some of the dialogue between Bill and the Doctor, being debuted to this, I think they said 1814, era of the past, being that Bill is black, she is very sort of notable to the idea of slavery still being a thing, and won't that be an issue? And when she first steps out of the TARDIS to be confronted with this elephant, she's sort of rocking 80s glam punk attire, so she can't really veritably walk out and rove the streets of this ages gone, bypassed era of London. And she goes back into the wardrobe as the Doctor leads her to, and he even redecks himself out with more befitting clothes of the era. But some of that dialogue, of course, very naturally so, reminded me of Martha and the 10th Doctor from Series 3, the Shakespeare Code, and even some of the dialogue about, what effect anything could have on the past. Any sort of changes, if I step on a butterfly, as Bill put it, something could happen in the future, something could unfold. She's afraid to take the flyer from the little street urchin girl and everything. And similarly so, the 10th Doctor actually had a more fun, playful way of describing it, sort of calling back on Back to the Future, which I really liked. I don't think it would have been smart to go ahead and replay that whole discussion. I thought the Doctor was pretty spot on, actually, with the way he described it. Oh, what about Pete? And of course, Bill is like, who's Pete? He's like, oh, well, he stepped on a butterfly and he disappeared. He was your best friend until just now. You just forgot him. How about that? And then, of course, she turns the tables a few scenes later. She's like, well, what about Pete? He's like, who's Pete? Absolutely love that. That was very much more so conforming to the Bill Doctor dynamic from the previous 2 episodes, whereas, again, it was on and off, a lot of the stuff in this episode. And before I get to my final note, I will now talk about the episode as a whole. I pretty much already kind of skirted the line of what my overall impression and reaction to it was. I did enjoy the episode for the most part, but my viewing experience, because of a couple different mitigating circumstances, was not the most pleasurable. And that could definitely have played into my reaction to it. I was left a little underwhelmed and a little dissatisfied, lesser so than I had been by the end of, say, the pilot or the previous episode, Smile, for Series 10. Both of them I enjoyed much more, whereas Smile took a turn, for the lesser so by the end, with Dumb Ape Humanity being Dumb Ape Humanity, as per usual, as I referenced in that episode discussion video. This episode overall was kind of like Swiss cheese. It was like, there were holes all throughout, dips in the mood, if you will, where there were things I really enjoyed and I really loved. The entire sequence building up to the first encounter the Doctor and Bill have with this elitist a-hole, if you will, who is exploiting this poor, marine life, this poor fish, where he's telling her, let me be the one to do the talking. This could be something alien in origin. It could be something exploiting humanity, sending people to their death and everything. And you're going to be emotional. You're going to have an outburst and everything. I loved, because you knew, it was almost telegraphed that, as soon as this guy comes in, he's going to show some level of pomposity and the Doctor's going to clock him one, which unfortunately was something that was spoiled in the teasers for the series. I don't think they actually showed it in the preview for this episode attached to the previous, but it was something you saw in the series trailers and teasers before the series began airing. And I recognized the room, I knew what the setup was going to be, and I knew what the punchline was going to be, literally, very literally a punchline to the chops. And that was satisfying to watch, but it was a little bit of a letdown because I already knew what was going to be happening there. And whereas that was one of the highlights in the episode, there were still things that just bottomed out a little bit for me, just made it a less as stellar viewing experience. I wasn't as into certain scenes as I was others. And it almost, if you had told me this episode was written by 2 writers, one more focusing on the Bill Doctor dynamic we'd had been, previously shown in the first 2 episodes of Series 10, and then the rest of it was written by somebody else who wasn't quite jiving with that. That's kind of how this episode felt to me, largely overall. It wasn't, wholly dissatisfying, but there were elements to it that were. And I can't exactly put my finger on why. I liked from the outset the time and place setting that this was unfolding in. I was very intrigued by, the Thames having been frozen over and the frost fair and everything like that. At the start of the episode, I was really sort of intrigued and enticed by that, compelled by that. But as the episode went on, it just started to look like everything else we've seen before. The uniqueness of the time and place started to unravel and become lost on me, and then I was more so trying to focus on the Dr. Bill dynamic, which was really the selling point. Even with the dip in mood that the previous episode Smile had taken for me, they were the saving grace. And in this episode, again, it was dialed back. It was lesser so, because so much of the way Bill was characterized in the writing of this episode, just it felt like it could have been any other companion. It did not feel like the uniqueness of voice and personality and point of view, as I say, that Bill has had in the first 2 episodes of the series thus far. And I kind of hope this isn't spelling out a tipping of the hat that she's going to be much more conformed to a more normal kind of companion. I was hoping her uniqueness would be lasting series long, that kind of thing. And so, I mean, it was, I can assume this episode is going to be a love it and hate it kind of thing, a very divisive episode for people, because again, it was up in the air for me. There were things I really liked, things I did not enjoy that much, and I don't know exactly what it is, but that's just the way I reacted to it. Again, it could have been very much to do with the viewing experience I had, because there were mitigating circumstances, as I say, that were playing into it, making it less than desirable in some estimation. And that could have just, put me in an ill, funky mood, and maybe that's why I reacted thusly to it. Or maybe they are fair criticisms. Maybe I'm right on the money, and you will share in that opinion. Of course, I always love hearing from you guys in the comments below. Love it or hate it, anything goes. As long as we have a great conversation where we are respectable and amicable in the end, anything goes. You can say whatever you want about it, however you felt about it. But referencing back for the finale of this video to the final note that I made, was the aspect of Nardole. Of course, by the end of this episode, the Doctor finally comes back to the present where he was supposed to be. Nardole was making tea. As soon as Nardole walks in the room, he sees the Doctor and he notices something is off. Now, at first, when he first reacted to that, I wasn't actually cognizant in that moment that the Doctor was still wearing his 1800s attire. So it was almost like, wow, Nardole already knows just by looking at the Doctor's expression or something like that. But no, he was probably noticing the clothes, the outfit, the attire. He also looked at Bill, who was still wearing her dress very much, and searching the internet to find out if there was any listings from those many ages ago about all the craziness that had happened at the time. And she wasn't finding anything. The Doctor goes over and manhandles her phone a little bit and calls up an article. One of the neat things about it was, in the end, of course, they managed to give a more benevolent life to the street urchins who were having to steal because they were poor and they were homeless, and were taking undesirable employ for the purposes of getting money and stealing from people. And so it was kind of really cool that the Doctor very literally doctored, an official document to make one of those street urchin boys the heir to this a-hole, as I say, this erudite, chip on his shoulder, elitist a-hole. His entire estate was left to this kid, and most notably, he probably took care of all the rest of the kids. That was pretty cool. But as I say, with Nardole's coming in, he's taking issue with the Doctor going back on his oath. Again, we have a reference to something in Doctor Who. This is kind of reminding me of, like, certain questions about the Doctor, whether it having been the Time War previously, or the Doctor's, that apparatus, I forget what they called it, that, eventually he would be pulled inside before going to Gallifrey again, the 12th Doctor. He was trapped inside it for, like, several million years or whatever it was, and constantly recycling. And like something along those lines where it's like a series-long question mark. What is that about? And it just, the way Nardole was reacting, we've already seen in the pilot, the first episode of Series 10, there was some talk about it. This oath, this grand oath. You went back on your oath. Oath, 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 oath. And I'm just like, what's the damn oath? What does it entail? Just tell me already. Don't string me along the entire series, the entire season, beating me over the head with this. I know about the oath. I want to know about the oath. You don't have to remind me about the oath. Tell me about the oath. But in any case, I digress. Nardole being snarky and snippy as he is, he goes back down to the vault, which is why he is so concerned. That has to do with whatever this oath is. It plays directly into it, that the Doctor is supposed to be, guarding this vault for the purposes of whatever is held and contained within it. And There's been a lot of speculation about what that is. I put forth of my own accord, could it be the Master? Could it be the First Doctor? Anything like that, conforming to rumors. And the confirmation that John Sim is returning, and we know Michelle Gomez's Misty is returning as well. And so the knock-in really sort of raised my eyebrows, because it almost feels like too good to be true that, oh, it's the Master. Well, of course, it's the knocking, the 4 knocks, the drum beat and everything. It's hinting at the Master. But the thing of that is, that makes me, because of how much that resounded to me in mind, it then makes me dial back and go, no, it's a red herring. It's somebody else. There's somebody else in there. It's the First Doctor, or being that it was knocking, I'm like, oh, could it be Donna? Could it be Wilf? He was the one with the 4 knocks, sent the 10th Doctor to his penultimate regeneration. I even just threw in Clara and Ashildr, or the Lady Me, as it were, because there have been, as of the time of this recording, some rumors going around that Clara might be showing up in the Christmas special around the time of the 12th Doctor's regeneration. And I'm all for that. I'd love to see her one last time, maybe put a definitive cap on her story, because where she was left, she and Ashildr / me are out roaming all time and space in their diner TARDIS thing. And it's just kind of like, do we really need to leave that hanging open? Can we just, sweep that under the rug somehow and get rid of it? So one final time to see Clara is very welcome to me. But I don't know. Those are my speculations. The Master, one of the incarnations of the Master or another, the First Doctor, perchance maybe Susan, Donna, Wilf, Clara, Ashildr, me, whatever. Not me, the Lady Me. And so those are pretty much my thoughts overall on the episode. I was reminded a lot of series stories past from the modern series thus far, and to arguable better and worse effect. I mean, certain things I was like, oh, cool, this is like, and other times I was like, oh, this is like, as I've already gone through the listing. And so far, this was the first episode that was well and truly a dip compared to the first 2 of the series for me. It wasn't all bad. There were definitely standout, more spectacular, funny, humorous, entertaining moments and gripping moments, but most of it was like been there, done that in a lot of ways. And most disappointingly so in the characterization of Bill Potts, who in those first 2 episodes, she seemed much more unique, much more a voice and point of view of her own. Things we have not quite seen before exactly, in that molded shape and form and characterization and performance. And unfortunately, she was very much more conformed to the average companion scenario, things we've seen before multiple times. And I don't know, it was less than stellar. It was good, but it was just good, So yeah, that is pretty much my thoughts on the episode. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below, as I say, what your reaction to it was, love it or hate it, and yeah, otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this. I'm definitely going to be intrigued with the next episode, but I don't know, again, it could just be my mood during watching this, but the next episode, there are aspects that look really intriguing, really good. The guest star and everything like that looks really enticing, really compelling, but a lot of the other aspects to do with it, all the kids that are making up Bill's new, homestead and everything, the apartment for rent, sharing the apartment, whatever it is, it looks like it may end up being a Swiss cheese episode again for me, where it's going to be up and down, up and down. Hopefully it'll be better overall, a better overall viewing experience than this episode was. But again, I never like to downplay an episode of Doctor Who, but I just got to speak to how I'm feeling. And I was left feeling less than satisfied overall with the experience of watching this episode. So eventually I will watch it again, and I'll see if I have the same impact from it. Maybe I'll get into it that much more. That's usually what happens on subsequent viewings. I get more and more into it as I understand everything that was going on. And yeah, I guess that'll be pretty much it for me. Long, verbose, rambly Johnny Blues, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.